Welcome to Courageous Conversations with Lionheart Coaching Co., where we talk about the hard parts of our journey and the courage it can sometimes take to find our way back to ourselves. I'm your host, Mandy Woodard, and on this episode, you are going to get to hear a very courageous conversation with my new friend, Matt Fanning. Without even having met me yet, Matt so bravely came to tell me about his story of sobriety and where he was, how he got to where he is now, and he gives some great advice for if you're finding yourself in a similar space that he once found himself. And before we begin, I really want to say this. It was so important for me to have him on the show because I know at this point, we all know someone that is struggling with addiction. Maybe it's you yourself listening to this. And I want you to know that there is hope. Where you're finding yourself in this moment right now does not have to be your tomorrow. And so often, people with addiction get written off. Like, you're done for, it's done, there's no hope. And that is a lie. And I want to expose that lie. There is very much a possibility for healing. And you will hear that. You will hear that today through listening to his story. And if you or someone you know is struggling right now, I'm going to put some resources in the show notes of this episode. There is help out there. All right, my friend, let's get into it. Matt, you're here with me. And
yes.
I'm laughing because we've never met before.
We have never met until about 30 minutes ago. Pretty interesting how things kind of just line up.
That is exactly what happened because I'm going to tell you something. I didn't want to do anything today.
Yeah.
And when Richie said that he talked to you and, oh, by the way, he can come Thursday, I was like, I can't pass that up.
Yeah.
We have to do it.
Well, I think it's also interesting because the moment he asked me, I said, yeah, Thursday will work. Immediately, my mind starts telling me, find a way not to do it. Find a way to not be vulnerable today. Find a way to not be of service or to be there for other people. So I think it's a very way of balancing my thoughts that I know this is the right thing of being of service and being there for others and being vulnerable. But immediately my mind tries to get me to a place where I'm going to find any reason not to.
If I would have put you off, then do you think you might have not come? Maybe you would have, but you would have been grappling for much longer than just a couple days.
Oh, for sure. And I would have probably blamed you for being like, oh, cool, she didn't even want to. Okay, no problem. That was her decision. And then I feel less responsible for the way I was thinking. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. But I'm glad I'm here and I'm excited.
Will you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. I just turned 40. I live in Strasbourg with my fiance and my newly fiance. Which has been a pretty amazing. She is sober as well.
Okay.
We have 2 dogs. I work in a field where I get to help out other people. I've struggled with substance abuse and mental health the majority of my life, and I am grateful that I'm in a place to be of service to other people and to have found sobriety, and not just like to get sober, but to stay sober. And
yeah.
I've found really my purpose and passion in sobriety, which is to help other people who were or who are even in a place that I once was.
So that's where I will just add this then, because Richie, my husband, plays basketball with you every week. And I guess you guys were talking one day and he mentioned your story to me about how you have been sober for how many years now?
So June 22nd, so several months ago, it was so just over 7 years. June 22nd, 2015 is my sobriety date. Grace of God, date of time. You couldn't have told me this would ever happen.
I love that so much. But he only gave me little bullet points, but I was like, man, that's incredible. And even before I'd started the podcast, But then as soon as I thought, I got to tell you, you were one of the first people that I thought of when I was starting the podcast. And we had never met, though.
Yeah.
So I wasn't sure, like, how does that work?
Yeah.
But my husband, he just made it happen. So
the
I'm
middleman.
grateful.
Yeah,
Yes.
and it's cool when I'm given these opportunities for doors to open to, share my story or be vulnerable or be of service to others and to show other people there's a different way to do things, and you no matter where you are, it's not too late, and you have other options where you can find peace and be okay with yourself and find a joy of living and have a life better than, at least in my perspective, better than you could ever imagine, because that's kind of where my life is now. It's better than I've ever imagined.
Yeah.
And I'm no different than the next person.
Can you take us to where any of this began?
Yeah, so the start was you couldn't have ever told me I would have ever picked up alcohol or done a drug. But the start was never feeling okay with me. The start was having this void in my life where I never felt part of. I felt less than. It was this internal dialogue of how I would talk to myself. And then I drank for the first time. I was 17 after telling myself I never would, because I saw the effects it had on people I cared about. And
you saw the negative effects.
Correct. Yeah, okay. I saw how it could negatively affect people I cared about and family members and change the entire dynamic of families. And I told myself it would never be me.
Yeah.
And so I drank for the first time, graduation party with kids I grew up with. And I remember that feeling of fitting in. And I remember that feeling of being part of. And I think deep down, that's all I had ever wanted, is the validation of other people and to be part of. I also remember it like turning the volume down in my head with all the negative things I could tell about myself. And it opened up a door for me that I then, one that I could never close on my own, but I also didn't understand the dynamics of what I was doing to myself, the way that I drank and the way that my behaviors were. Like, none of those ever changed. I took that same kind of mentality, like drinking that way and blacking out and not remembering things was just like the normal thing to do. So I went away to college and took those same behaviors with me. And the tough part was, a year prior to drinking, I had my daughter. I was a junior in high school when she was born. All those feelings that came, I didn't know how to deal with. I didn't know how to talk about. Fear, shame, guilt. So I just stuffed those things. And what drinking did initially was kind of loosen those up. And they weren't as, they didn't choke me as much internally. So I thought that was just a normal thing, and that was good, because I was told and taught at a young age, like, as a man, you don't talk about how you feel. You tighten up your belt and you pull up your big boy pants and you figure it out. And I'm here to say, like, I'm for my entire life figuring out life well on my own. Yeah. And those behaviors didn't change, and in turn those behaviors and the way I turned to things, alcohol and then substances, progressed, and it took me down a road that I would have never imagined in a million years that I'd be. It started with drinking, and then before I got sober this time, I was a strung out heroin addict that was jobless, broke. My parents didn't trust me. I was a deadbeat father. Everything that should have been important to me took a back seat to the feeling that I was looking for in drugs and alcohol.
Do you know something that I think about, though, as you're telling me all of this, is how often, and maybe I'm jumping the gun in your story, but I do want to throw this in here, is that here you are at 40 doing phenomenal work and being of service to others, but how can I word this in a way that's good and true? The way so many in society write off people with substance abuse, you're never gonna. There are so many people that just don't even want to give the time of day to someone who's in that, and that hurts my heart, because I don't believe that, because I've seen too many stories like yours. But I can only imagine how it felt for you to be in that moment and feel like, how did you?
Yeah, it was like my secret. And I didn't understand stigmas back then. I didn't understand. initially being looked at a certain way, all I knew was that this was my secret that I wanted to keep safe. There was no talking about it. There was no being vulnerable. There was no discussing these internal feelings that I ended up turning to drugs and alcohol to try to reduce or push down. But the deeper I got, the more shame and guilt came. And that shame and guilt kind of dictated me never talking about it. Because my whole goal was to convince everyone else around me that I had my stuff together, whether it was the place I worked or where I lived or my car or how I dressed and all. It was just this external, it was just this focus on solving my problem externally, not realizing that I had an internal problem, one, and two, I needed to find like an internal solution. But that was never even in the realm of it. It was really just keeping the secret safe. And as my drug addiction progressed and my alcoholism progressed, there's no way, like I'm in too deep to talk about it now.
So you hit it though. That's got to be hard though to sit, because not only are you hiding it, you're obviously hiding it. You're feeling the shame and feeling the guilt. How the hell did you do that? How did you hide it? Or do you just think you hit it and everybody saw?
Yeah, I don't think I hit it very well. I think, and I think it's a human thing. You ask anyone how they're doing, and normally it's I'm good.
Yeah.
That's what we all say. I'm good, and that's how I would project. I'm good, and even if my life was falling apart around me, and even if I was losing everything that was important, I'm good. I'm fine, and my mentality was I'm going to figure this out, and not realizing that I couldn't figure it out while I was putting substances in my body. Like I couldn't face the feelings that I had internally. One, I couldn't really identify them. But two, I couldn't even get to them to identify them without, like if I didn't put drugs and alcohol in my body. And I couldn't stop doing that because of the shame, because of the guilt, because I felt like it was too late, because I had become this person that you couldn't have ever told me I was going to become.
Yeah. And how old were you? Take me through. So 17 sure. You started.
Yeah, it's 17.
And you were just drinking.
I was just drinking, smoking pot here and there. And I took that same behavior with me to college. My goal at the time was to come back every other weekend to be a father. And any plan that I've kind of made for myself on my own has never succeeded well until I stopped coming home because I wanted to focus on drinking and hanging out and being part of and hanging out with the cool kids and the pretty girls and getting validation from people and filling that void. And so my behavior still never changed. And my grades began to slip. I began to change my priorities to drinking more, to hanging out more, to all the reasons that I was in college to better myself, to better my future, to be a better father, to provide. Like they all went to the wayside to just chase this feeling that I got from hanging out with other people and drinking around the clock, and more importantly, just being part of something where I didn't have to sit with myself. So I flunked out of college going to my senior year, but I wasn't the problem, right? It was my father was the problem because he left at a young age. My daughter's mother was the problem because we were young. The guys I was hanging out with and drinking with all the time, they were the problem. Like it was almost this victim mentality of these things are happening to me.
It's a story you tell yourself.
Oh yeah, it's a story I believed.
Yeah.
And it was an easy story to tell because it was the way I perceived it. It was my perspective on things. I come back to Winchester, where I was from, and I get a big boy job managing a bank. So still my behaviors don't change. I'm just able to really dress up the outside.
Yeah.
Suit and tie, making good money. But you'd still find me out at a bar with my buddies on a Thursday, Friday, Saturday night. Like those, it was a behavior thing, and I couldn't recognize that because I thought, looking back, that I thought just like drugs and alcohol were my problem. Like realizing now with the help of other people, like I am the problem. I was the problem. I am still the problem. And then at 21 or 22, my kid brother, he introduced me to Oxycontin. And it's not here to brag. It's just, I always heard early on when I got introduced to sobriety that this disease is progressive. And I told myself again I would do it one time, just to fit in because he was hanging out with dudes that were my age. There's about a 4-year difference between him and I wanted to fit in. I wanted to feel validated. I wanted to be part of that day. And so I put that line in the sand and I do it one time. Again, that opens up another door that I couldn't close. And you couldn't have told me that day, telling myself I'm going to do it one time, that fast forward a couple months, that I would have drug dealers meeting me in the parking lot of where I worked, that I would have to go home and get high on my lunch break just to not be sick. And at that point, that was the real secret that I really needed to keep to myself, because I looked at drinking that it was just normal. That's what people did.
Yeah, it's become too common.
Yeah, and so at that point, it was really just, I need to keep this secret safe.
Yeah.
My brother didn't even know it was that bad. Like I thought no one knew it was that bad. It wasn't my fault when I lost that job from being drunk and being high at work. Like, I'm a victim. If it was just bad timing, right? And again, it was these lies that I told myself, whatever I could do to like not have to talk about how I was feeling.
And then did you create that same victim story of blaming your brother for being...
Yeah. Oh, for and we joke about it now. I think he takes more responsibility than I've ever given him, and not now, not after all this time has passed, but early on. I mean, there were times he said, "Matt, if I only didn't," and I'm like, I would have. It would have eventually happened, whether he played a part or not. Like, it was my choice, and I realized that like everything is a choice.
Yeah.
You know, and once I know about things, like, I'm accountable, and I wasn't aware back then. But early on, I was aware of what I was doing, and I couldn't ask for help. I couldn't talk about it. You asked me, everything's fine. And even losing that job, I got a job working at a restaurant where, again, these behaviors didn't change because I couldn't talk about them. And I was probably 25.
So what year was that, though?
Oh, geez.
Like 2005-ish?
So if... maybe 2007, maybe 2007.
Because the other thing with that is there was not education so much on what was happening.
No.
With those things.
So
with opiates.
Yeah. So again, it was this secret. It was this, I'm fine, everything's good, and I'm gonna figure out how to get out of this hole that I was digging myself. I'm gonna figure out a way to get out of it. Yeah. Like, because I have to. That's what men do, and I'm smart enough, and I'm intelligent enough. I have these things, and I did these whatever lie I could tell myself to, like, it was my mind telling me these things to believe in, so I didn't have to talk about what was really going on. And drugs at that point became the catalyst of me keeping everything to myself, because if I talked about what was really going on, and the fear and the shame and the guilt and the regret, even at that point, then the gig was up. Then people knew what was going on. But if I could just figure out a way to navigate out of this hole I was in, then I could figure it out. It was all ego. It was all pride. And for me, ego and pride was built out of fear.
Right.
And so I did. And my behaviors, again, never changed. Everything in my life got worse. Because people started... You know, my parents had been through it enough with my brother that they could recognize things. But I was really good at pushing things under a rug. I was really good at saying, I'm not as bad as him. I'm not as bad as this person. I'm not as bad. And I found ways to compare out. And
wow, that's pretty powerful, though. I have to stop and take like a second, because I'm not as bad. Mm-hmm. That is a story to tell yourself, well, I'm not as bad as this person.
I've done it my whole life. I got introduced to sobriety. I was probably 25 or 26. I was working with this guy at this restaurant, and he said, you should come to this meeting with me. Mm-hmm. And I remember going to my first meeting and being introduced to sobriety, and for the first time in my life, I could tell you where I was, I could tell you the row I sat in, I could tell you the chair. And this was 15 years ago. And I heard people talk about how I had been feeling my entire life. But I also heard people talk about, like, banging heroin and losing their houses and losing their families and losing their jobs and losing all these things. And life had become so bad that right away I thought to myself, like, I'm not as bad as you guys. Like, I compared out very quickly. And what I have realized is my entire life, the people I compared myself to that I'm quote unquote not as bad, like I quickly became them. And
that's incredible.
Yeah, and I think we all do it. I know I'm not special enough to be the only person. I think we always compare out. At least like in my experience with sobriety, and I was comparing out long before drugs and alcohol. If I only had that, or if I only had that thing, or if I only had this thing, or if I only was able to do this, then that would give me what I needed to make me feel whole and to fill this void in my life and to make me feel quote unquote like a man. So I was always finding myself comparing out because I was never okay with who I was.
Yeah.
And so my behaviors still really didn't change. I just got sober. You know, because I was like, well, I just like to drink and do pills. I'm not as bad as these other people.
Right. And how many people who are working to get sober sit and say that very same thing. Yeah. And then they don't actually get sober because they recognize, oh, well, I'm not as bad as this guy over here. I'm all right.
Yeah, my mind, looking back, did a great job of like convincing me that I wasn't as bad.
Yeah.
Not, oh, I can relate to feelings. You know, what I've realized, all of our stories, our origins, our backgrounds are all different, but I've turned to drugs and alcohol because of my feelings, because I don't know how to cope with life. I didn't know how to cope with life. Good things, bad things. I didn't know how to dissect and work my way through them.
So can we dive into that? Because did you deal with anxiety? Did you depression? Are those the things that you were struggling to cope with?
I think so. I deal with mental health. I thought my mental health was relational to my drug and alcohol abuse.
Yeah.
What I've realized is I don't need drugs and alcohol to deal with anxiety. I don't need drugs and alcohol to deal with depression. I still deal with mental health. I have learned to deal with it by talking about it. Mm-hmm. You couldn't have told me ever in my life that mental health was real. Like that I was just ignorant towards it.
Ignorant towards it, or like when you say you didn't think it was real, how do you mean?
So I didn't think it was real because I was just so ingrained with like, you don't talk about things.
Okay.
And I just need to figure out how to get through this.
Right.
And I could never, as I said earlier, I could never get through those things on my own, and I still can't. I still need to, on a daily basis, talk about things going on, and I'm so thankful I have men in my life. I have a fiance. I have people who are in my corner.
Right.
That even on the days where I don't want to talk about it, still know how to get stuff out of me, because I still know now that like that's the answer, that I can talk about things. And I never understood the idea of when I talked about things, there were other people that could relate to those
right.
to those things, and I just thought I was so special that no one could relate to the dysfunction I had as a kid, or being a father at 16, or then losing this or turning to this thing. And I just thought I was so unique.
Yeah.
And so when I got introduced to sobriety, I don't even want to say I stayed sober. I did, but I didn't do any work.
Because you didn't work on the feeling part.
Correct. I was like, I'm part of something. I get to hang out with like the cool kids and the pretty girls and find validation through those people, and I get to be part of. And I never understood the dynamic of doing work. I never understood the dynamic of
healing.
Of healing, right. So because of that, my behaviors didn't really change. So you fast forward like 4, 5, 6 months, those same cool kids and those pretty girls went out to get high, and I followed suit because I couldn't. I didn't have any self-worth. I was just a follower. Except this time, those little yellow pills that I was used to doing like weren't around. So I got, at like 20, I don't know, a little bit of time later, I got introduced to heroin. And I'm not sitting here bragging. Like, there was nothing to brag about the life I was living as a heroin addict. But we're talking about the progressiveness of this disease. And again, as always, line in the sand, I'm going to do it once just to fit in. And it was, again, like the biggest door that I couldn't close. And at I don't know, 25 years old, that was a door that like stayed open, that feeling like followed me everywhere I went for the next, even and we'll get to it, but even when I was sober for a while before, it was still that like lurking feeling that was following me that I just couldn't let go of.
And what was that? Was it the shame, or was it that was way too good?
It was both, because I think I got to a point where it was, having, like, you get sober and all these feelings are still there. Because I thought that if I just got high enough or drunk enough, those feelings would eventually just go away. And then I got sober the very first time, and it was, these feelings are all right in front of me, and I couldn't talk about them, so I would just focus on, well, if I can just be part of this, or if I can hang out with these people, if I can do these things, if I can, anything I can externally to not have to deal with me. But I also couldn't sit by myself.
Yeah.
So it got harder to be sober because I refused to take the suggestions of other men and say, you should do these things. We suggest you do these things. Like I wanted to find a shortcut, like a quick, real feel good.
I have to laugh because I just have seen this.
Yeah.
I have enough people close to me that have been where you were, and I've seen that. Let me just do this one thing and maybe I'll see God and then I'll stop.
Yeah. And I was looking for a quick fix. And what I have thankfully learned is sobriety, there isn't a quick fix. This is hard.
Yeah.
Like, my sobriety is it's without a doubt the hardest thing I've ever done, but at the same time, it's the most rewarding thing I've ever done. But at that point, I couldn't see that.
Yeah, because when you're starting to work to get sober, you feel like, what's the point?
Yeah.
And there's nothing good on the other side of not having this thing that numbs me out and keeps me from feeling.
Absolutely. The only thing I felt like I had was validation of other people and belonging, and not in the belonging where, like, I need this to make my life better, but it was belonging in the sense of I can be around people and feel validated through what they think of me, right? But when I got introduced to heroin, it kind of it gave me this feeling that I thought I needed at the time. And again, a one-time decision turned into years later of a life that I never wanted to live again, that I thought I was getting out of it. But the work that I refused to do because I wanted to find a shortcut put me in this place. It was my choices. And that lasted, I don't know, X amount of time. I was probably a year or two. I was 28. And the same people that I was running with and that were giving me the validation that I thought I needed to feel good, even though I wasn't feeling good. Because now, again, it's this secret.
Yeah.
A bigger secret. But I was too shamed at this point, too shameful. And my inner dialogue was saying, you're just a deadbeat. You're just a loser. You're a failure. You're no good. That internal dialogue ran the show. And I didn't even understand that until I've been fortunate enough to do work now to look back and realize that so the people that I was running with got sober, and these guys moved into a sober living house, and I moved in too, only for the sheer fact is I just didn't want to be by myself. I didn't want to get high by myself. I was so drawn to what other people thought of me that was the smartest move. Plus, like, I could get sober now because I'm really miserable. So I do that, and life began to get better. And I remember I met this guy, his name was Carrie, who became, like, it might sound weird to be a 40-year-old and be like my best friend, but it was the first person.
Oh, that's not weird at all.
He was the first person that I allowed myself to open up to, like, on a real, like, personal level. My fears, my failures, my shame. First man I probably ever cried in front of. He was living in this sober living house. He was a couple years younger than me. And one night when these, like, cool kids went out to get high again after living there, like, I went to follow suit, and I'll never forget this. He grabbed me by my shirt and he said, "Fanning, why don't we try something different?" And he stopped me from going out to get high. I don't know what would have happened, but I look back thinking he, like, saved my life that night.
I believe it.
Right?
100% I believe it.
And so I stayed sober. I stayed sober for 3 years. I didn't do any of the work. And I always compare it to this, like, over the time of me staying sober, like, life got better. I didn't get better. Okay. Life got better. Like, I was back in my daughter's life.
Yeah.
Slowly. Like, right. I was able to show up at sporting events, and I was able to spend time with her every other weekend with my father, who kind of stepped up when I didn't. He's an amazing man. I got a big boy job again. Like, all these external things. Life got better. My parents began to trust me.
Right.
But internally, I wasn't better because I didn't do any of the work.
Right.
It was almost this show of, okay, now I'm really going to focus on really getting people to think I have my stuff together. So I would speak at groups, or I would share my story, or I would help out other people just to tell other people that I was doing those things. Because if I could convince you that I had my stuff together and that everything was good, it was real easy for me to look at myself in the mirror and convince myself that I had my stuff together and that everything was good, even though internally I was like a mess.
Yeah.
It was like a real pretty trash can, right?
Yeah.
That if I could keep everyone at arm's length, but just show you what I had on the outside.
Right.
It was just a show. It was an exhausting show. And I did it for as long as I could. And if it wasn't for like my best friend Carrie and other men, like my relapse probably would have happened earlier.
Yeah.
But I was 3 years sober. My mom had come up from Florida. She was living in Florida at the time, and she surprised me and was at my 3-year celebration. It was a really cool moment. I had no idea she was there. Very emotional. Because we don't think about, I'm going to say we, I can speak for myself. I didn't think about the effects I was putting on my loved ones.
That's what you said something a bit ago, and I was going to ask that, is how was it for your family?
I never thought I was hurting anyone. Yeah. I thought I was just hurting myself. But my inner dialogue and my shame and my guilt and my regret and my doubt and my fear that ran the show, I was only hurting myself, I thought. And I thought I deserved that because I'm no good. Looking back, like I didn't have to put my loved ones, especially my mother, I mean my father too, my brother, my loved ones, but especially her, through the things I put her through. And you take that moment when she showed up and surprised me at 3 years sober. 2 weeks later was Mother's Day weekend. And she walked in and she found her baby boy like high and drunk. And because I liked, back then I liked to categorize things. I thought heroin was my problem.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that I'm the problem. So I thought my life was so unmanageable, quote unquote, because I couldn't talk about how I felt. I chose not to.
Yeah.
So I went to a doctor and said my life is so unmanageable. I'm anxious. I'm overwhelmed. And he gave me Klonopin, and I went on a Thursday. I don't know why I remember this. I went on a Thursday of Mother's Day weekend, so it was just about 2 weeks after my mom surprised me at 3 years sober, and he said, "Take one a day. Come back in 3 weeks. We'll see how you feel." And just taking one, I opened up Pandora's box, and within 4 days they were all gone. And I don't remember much of the weekend. I do remember my mom walking in. I had a big thing of wine by the couch, and I was like slobbering on myself. And I'm not proud of that.
It infuriates me though. Do you know that not you, not your action. It infuriates me because that is the protocol.
Yeah.
You go into an office
For sure.
and say that this is what you're feeling. Here's a prescription.
Well, I'll take full responsibility as well, because I told him initially that I was an addict. I did the right thing, and he gave me a non-narcotic. Like I had this whole thing planned, right?
Yeah.
And he gave me a non-narcotic, and I called back several days later and I said, it's not, like, this isn't working. So I had to go back that Thursday, and I was like, I just need something, like this isn't working. And that's when he gave me Klonopin. Like I had the whole thing planned out because I thought that this, like it would calm.
So he gave you something, and then a few days later
he gave me a non-narcotic at the beginning of the week because I wasn't going to press the issue. But I thought at the time that like that would solve my internal problem, because I still couldn't talk about how I felt. I couldn't.
Right.
I just couldn't. I saw all these other men who were sober for the 3 years I was, who had been sober before I got sober, who were sober after I got sober, who are still sober to this day, being able to use these tools and do these things that I could not on my own wrap my head around, because I thought there's no way I can talk about my shame. There's no way I didn't have the ability to do that. I didn't know where to start. It was like so frumpled up in this big, humongous spider web of feelings that I didn't know where to untangle it, right? And so I thought, cool, if I can just take this little pill, then it'll help me breathe.
Well, and I'm sure your doctor thought the same. So let me not knock him so much. And also, what year was this? Like, I think medicine has come a long way, and I'm hoping that more doctors are getting on board with this. But that truly is not the... Sometimes it is the answer.
Sure.
It shouldn't be the first answer.
No, and I knew exactly what I was doing. I just wanted to find something that would take the edge off, because all these feelings that came up over the 3 years of being sober, and the show I was putting on out of ego and pride, which is for me directed out of fear, was exhausting. It was, I was just emotionally
done.
I was just done. But I was too prideful to just go and get high again because of all the things that life had given me back. And I didn't look at it that time as like, these are blessings. I looked at them as like, of course I have a big boy job again. Of course, like, I'm helping people. Of course I can go share my story and put a bow on it, make it sound real. Of course I can. It was all ego. It was like, you're the man.
You painted the picture.
I did. And that in itself was exhausting. And what I didn't realize at the time was trying to find that shortcut, what was about to happen over the next like 13 months of my life. Mm-hmm. And I was in a bad place. But I categorized it and thought, okay, heroin's my problem. So as long as I don't do that, because I started comparing out and seeing other people that I knew smoking weed and drinking without immunity. And I thought I could do the same thing. I've been sober long enough. I know enough about me, even though I never talked about it.
Yeah. That
I can do that too. And I did that.
You could control it just
Correct.
Enough.
Just enough. And I thought I had done it for a week. And within a week, right back, line in the sand. I'm going to do it one time just to see if it's the same. Because that shame just began to double down and triple down. Because now it's the realization of, I was just 3 years sober and I just threw it all away. And that's what my mind was telling me. Yeah. Other men in my life would be like, you didn't.
No.
You just changed a date. Let's figure this out. And I was like, no, I'm good. I can figure it out.
It doesn't take away from the 3 years that you were sober.
But I was convinced it did.
Yeah.
Like that was my inner dialogue. And it went from a one-time event to, by the end of it, 13 months later, I'm jobless, homeless, penniless, doing things I never thought I'd do to get my next fix, lying, stealing, manipulating, that's not who I am, but it's who I became. And my best friend, who I stayed sober with, unfortunately started getting high too, and it was for the same reasons. We kept stuff in. I mean, we talked to each other, but like, looking back, only having one person I felt comfortable opening up to was not enough.
Well, and especially if they're just in that same place as you.
Correct. And we were getting high separately and doing our own little lives separately, and our lives became unmanageable and miserable. And him and I came up with this pretty amazing plan that we were going to check into rehab together. Mm-hmm. And this was 2015. This was January of 2015, and we started planning this. We would stay high separately. We both knew what was going on, and we tried to be there for each other. And you fast forward another month, it was February, and the plan was my mom let me sleep at her home, and it's sad looking back because I would crash my mom's couch and I'd wake up to her in the middle of the night hovering over me,
just probably trying to
just
make sure
making
you're
sure I was breathing.
Yeah.
But she's the crazy one, right? And it's a shame of the things we put our loved ones through. It's a shame.
I love that you just admitted that you thought that, though.
Well, it took a long time because, Mom, you're crazy, go back to bed.
Yeah.
There was a day like today, and she found me slumped over in my car still running, door locked, windows up, and I finally came to with her pounding on the glass of my car window, and I finally come to, Mom, I'm just tired, you're crazy, I'm fine. And it's so sad how lost I became because of the choices I made, and it's so sad the effects I had on people that love me unconditionally. So I would randomly crash on her couch. The plan was for me and my best friend to sleep at her house and I was going to drive him to Maryland to get his car the next morning, and we were going to drive back. He was going to follow me back to Winchester. We were going to check into rehab. And that morning, it was the 18th of February 2015, and I tried sneaking out of my mom's sliding glass door to the deck, and I'll never forget this. He like popped off the couch and said, "Don't forget about your boy." He knew where I was going. I didn't want to get sick, because like it wasn't even I was getting high for fun.
You just try not to feel sick.
Try not to feel sick.
Yeah.
Like forget the feelings, forget all the shame and the guilt. Like I just didn't want to be sick. Like drugs and alcohol stopped working. And my mind didn't remind me of 4 years prior that he potentially saved my life and kept me sober. I just wanted to be popular that morning. I just wanted to be the man.
Yeah.
So instead of saying, "No, man, sorry," like me, him, and my kid brother spent all morning getting high, because I wanted to be that guy.
Yeah.
And I drove him to Maryland, dropped him off at his car, and he told me, "You got to give me a couple days to get my stuff together," and I was in no place to argue with him.
Right.
And he told me he loved me. I told him I loved him, and he texted me that night, "Love you, buddy." And that was the last time I heard from him. And he got high again that night, and they found him overdosed and gone the next day. And
I'm so sorry.
You know, yeah, and it's tough. I talk about him out of honor and out of respect, and it should have been a wake-up call for me, and it wasn't, because again, I didn't know how to talk about those feelings.
Yeah, because now your boy is gone.
Yeah, and the one person that I had trusted with these feelings, even like a tad, is no longer there, and I felt responsible, and the shame is there, and the guilt is there, and at that point, all I wanted to do was die. And so that was February of 2015. So literally for that next like 4 months, my only intention was to try to get high enough to like not wake up. And what I've learned, thankfully, is I'm not the only person that's ever been there.
Right.
I'm also not the only person that's ever felt shame of being there.
Right.
But in that moment, I felt shame of being there. I felt like no one ever can relate.
No one ever, yeah.
And that was my goal for that last 4 months. Every single day, I was just so sad and so miserable, and I was so broken internally. And it like makes me emotional now, because I still remember it, and thank God I remember it. That like I didn't know anything else to do but not want to live, because I thought not being alive was better than being alive with all these feelings that were like I didn't know what to do with. And you fast forward those 4 months, it was in June of that same year, 2015. It was the 15th of June 2015. I'm a numbers guy. It was a Monday, and I slept in my mom's house, and what normally would have been that morning of me manipulating my mom for money, I spit out that I needed help. And it was the first time I think in my life I ever like asked for help.
Wow.
Like meant it. And immediately I regretted it.
Now it's time to act
because
on
it's
that.
time to act on it. And in my experience, once you ask for help, it's real hard to come back from it.
Right.
And immediately, you know, my mom had been going to support groups. My mom had been like trying to recover herself, because what I realized is this is a family disease. Like everyone suffers.
Right.
So if everyone suffers, everyone should be able to recover. And my mom had been trying for years to recover. So she had been going to these support groups and turning to people, and I said, "Mom, it's never going to work." Oddly enough, like those support, like I facilitate that support group now that she used to go to, that I would tell her like it's never going to work. It is. It's a very, very. I'm blessed to be able to do that. And she found this rehab for me. It wasn't the one I was going to go to. 4 months prior, with my best friend, I don't know, looking back, like God started just lining things up. And she found it in Detroit, Michigan, 8.5 hours away from home. And she calls the place. And it's really unfortunate then, because I was 32 and my mom is making these phone calls for me. Like I don't even have the ability to, like I'm stuck in being a scared 6-year-old kid internally, right?
I can see that for you, but I can also tell you, I mean, my kids are still young, teenager and younger. I don't care how old my baby is. She didn't care either.
Yeah. Oh, no, she didn't
And
care.
as much as, I mean, like you said, her banging on the door that day when you were in the car, like my heart goes out to her because I just can't even imagine as a mother being in that position. But my heart also goes out to you.
Yeah, she's
because
the hero.
Because you were hurting so bad to be there.
Yeah, I was. And the real deal was like, she's the hero of my story. Like, she has prayed me into this life that I have. She is very spiritual. I never thought spirituality would be a thing in my life. I thought it wasn't going to work in her life, but she, no matter what was going on, she is a woman of prayer, and she would always tell me, Matt, I'm praying for you. I'm praying for you. Even enabling, Matt, I'm praying for you. Mom, it's not going to work. Not for me. I'm too broken. I'm too this. I'm too that. So when she made this call, I was sitting beside her, like instantly and completely regretting asking for help. And they say, can you be here this Thursday? Which was like the 18th. And my mom's talking to them, and I'm like nodding my head no. And she's telling them, well, we can't be Thursday. And this place said, we'll give you one more option. Can you be here the 22nd? A week from now. And my mom just said, like, we'll be there.
Yeah.
And they said, we have one rule. Rules don't apply to me, right? But we have one rule, and you have to come detoxed. You have to already come detoxed. And they asked my mom to hand me the phone so they could say this to me. So me to completely understand that this is their rule. And do I understand? Of course, yeah, I understand. I'll stop today. No problem at all. I didn't stop. There was no detox. But looking back, like in that last week, like I stopped praying to die. Like there was hope. And I didn't even realize it until like looking back. But I knew like the gig was finally up. And it was going to be okay. And I didn't know how it was going to be okay.
You just felt
picture.
it.
I did. I could just breathe. And
right.
So my behavior still didn't change that week. I just knew that I had a week.
Yeah.
And so the 22nd of June, a week later, my mom drives me 8.5 hours to this rehab in Detroit, Michigan. And I don't recall much. I was not well, and I don't remember filling out paperwork. I'm sure she did it all for me. They let me sleep it off, and the next afternoon I begin to get sick, and they say, like, you can't be, like, we got to do something else. You can't just lay here in your bed sick. Like, we gave you a rule.
And you didn't do it.
You didn't do it.
Yeah.
So, like, pack up your bag.
Right.
And they said the best they would do is take me to a hospital. So they take me to this hospital. I'm sick as a dog. And in this hospital in Detroit, this nurse sits there, which felt like days, and found this Salvation Army for me between 6th and 7th mile. And she was like, yo, he's 32, like has nothing, no money, no insurance, no nothing. And they said, yo, we'll give him like 5 days. That's the best. Well,
wow.
So the rehab said, if I go and start detoxing, I can come back. The person that sat with me from this rehab in the hospital drove me to the Salvation Army, dropped me off, and said, if I start detoxing, call them, and they'll come back and get me. And so I walk in, and they put me in this little sweet orange jail jumpsuit. I'm like 150 pounds soaking wet, skin and bone, my eyes sunken in. I kind of showed you a picture earlier. I was just so sad and so broken. Deep down, I was just so scared. They do my intake, and I'll never forget this, and I'm so thankful I remember this conversation. The woman asked me, she says, honey, what's your problem? And I said, ma'am, I like to drink and do heroin. Like, that's my problem. And she laughed at me. It's like scoffed at me. Like, I'm like, ma'am, I don't get it. Like, I just got dismissed almost from rehab because I'm not detoxed off of these things. Like, those are absolutely my problem. And she said, it's not. And she pointed to her head. She pointed kind of to her temple and said, honey, like, your problem is up here. Those are just the things you do to try to solve your problem. And if I would have had the energy, I probably would have argued with her. I'm grateful I remember that conversation because...
That seems very impactful, though. That's quite the thing to say. But you had to be in a place to receive it, because somebody could have said that to you previously and it wouldn't have hit.
I couldn't hear it until I could hear it. And I don't even think in the moment I heard it. Again, like, that's why I'm grateful that I can remember that conversation, because now just over 7 years later, she's 100% right. Wow. So we finished my intake, and I remember calling my mom from this payphone inside of the Salvation Army, and I tried to, because as my biggest fan and my biggest enabler, like, I know how to manipulate her. And instantly, because I remember driving through to this rehab, and my mom is, stuff we've never seen before. When I say slums, like, I mean it, and I'm not judging. It just was what it was. It is what it is, and so I remember calling her and saying, "Mom, I'm not in rehab anymore," thinking that would scare her to come back and get me.
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Mom, I was getting sick, and then this is where I am. Like, just come back and get me," knowing she just drove like 8.5 hours, and then 8.5 hours back to drop her baby boy off.
Right.
And she's bawling on the other end of the phone. Like, I have goosebumps now. Like, I remember this. "Matthew, I want to so bad. I want to so bad, but I can't."
Yeah.
And it was the first time in my life my mom's ever really said no to me. And it was the best thing she could have ever done.
Wow.
And I remember getting off the phone with her. I even, like, remember calling my kid brother and being like, "Yo, come get me." And he was like, "Yo, I can't, dude, I can't do that. Like, you're on your own."
Yeah.
But I remember mom saying, like, "Matt, like, I'll be praying for you, but you got to figure this out." And
that's probably exactly what she had to do.
She did.
I know, and I'm, like, as an outsider looking, I always know that that's always a turning point. But it's also the hardest freaking turn to make.
It was the hardest turning point, because then I realized now I'm alone. Now I'm by myself. There's no validation from other people.
Yeah.
There's no trying to be accepted by this group of people or by doing this thing. I'm alone with all these feelings that I've been scared my entire life.
In a place so far from home.
So far from home. And what's crazy enough, looking back, like, I thought I was better than these people. Like,
right.
Like, I remember walking back down this hallway, and it was the first left, and it was like this detox room with people off the street, with people, and I'm like, I'm better than these. Like, I'm better than these people.
Right.
Like, comparing out like I had always done.
Yeah.
And I remember laying on this bed and just talking to whoever was listening, and I didn't even realize how broken I was spiritually. I mean, I'm like no saint, but there was no spirituality. There was no praying. Like, the only praying I had ever really done besides foxhole prayers was, like, let this one kill me, right?
Yeah.
And I just remember, like, saying out loud, like, I just can't do this anymore. And if you want, like, anything to do with me, like, whoever's listening, like, I'm done. And, like, oddly enough, like, a day at a time, grace of God, the help of other people, like, I haven't found a reason to get high or drink since.
That's amazing.
And it is, knowing that, like, I did not, like, the life I live now and the life that I get to live now, I didn't even want. Like, I didn't even want. So I stay there for 5 days, and I had this moment, and I don't share it often. The next day, I'm sitting in this, like, TV room about the size of this office, and there's a TV up in the left corner with a movie on, and I'm sitting there detoxing, and this gentleman sits pretty much as close as we're sitting. He could have sat anywhere in the room, and he sat down beside me. He said, "What are you here for?" And this was an older gentleman, I don't know, maybe in his 60s, frail, off the streets. And I said, "Dude, you really want to know?" And he said, "Yeah." And he just let me vomit, and he just let me, I'm this, I'm a junkie, I'm a drunk, I'm no good, I'm a deadbeat father, I have this, blah, 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 blah. List went on and on and on and on. And it never interrupted me, and he never said anything. And then I was done. He said, "Oh, you struggle with those things?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Yeah, man, me too." Looking back, like, my whole life I was told, like, you should be doing this, you shouldn't be doing this, Matt, just stop, you should just do this instead. And, like, that added that level of guilt and shame, because those things that I knew I should or shouldn't be doing, like, I couldn't get there on my own. And then all of a sudden, this stranger, I still carry my wallet, he wrote me a note the day he left with his name and his number and a message on this piece of newspaper, and I carried it around. But it was that moment that I realized like I'm not alone.
Yeah, it's not just you.
And it's like the me too is greater than you should. And I don't even think I quite understood it then. Like I respected the moment for what it was, but it I still haven't forgotten it. That the moment I start opening up about how I feel, other people can relate. And the moment other people open up to me about how they feel, maybe not their story, maybe not their origin, maybe not their background, but their feelings, how they feel.
Right.
There's a relation there. That's where the weight and depth is.
Yeah.
And so I go back to the rehab, and it's looking back, we were doing everything that I like thought was the dumbest thing in the world. We would wake up in the morning and at like 5:30 together and like go together and like pray the day in, and they would have us going to classes, and it was a faith-based rehab, but it was also like looking back, I didn't even realize it was like a behavioral modification place where we would have to go up and clean our room. We would have to make our bed. We had to make our room like look tidy, and we'd have to stand outside, and people would have to come in and check. And if it was good, we could go downstairs. And if it wasn't, we'd have to go redo it. And after each meal, there would be people that would clients that would have to go in and like do the dishes after breakfast, after lunch, after dinner. There were people who did the laundry. It was this behavior, and I didn't understand it at the time, but oddly enough, now I'm not big on waking up at 5:30 in the morning, but those things, like, I understand the importance of those today. Yeah. Because it's the way I start my day, and I'm not great at them, but I also understand the importance of them now, right? Yeah. And I finished my little journey at rehab and came back home. And again, even though I haven't picked up a drink or a drug in just over 7 years, like, life's tough. Right. You know, and life has shown up. And life has not gone my way, right? Because I have this like certain plan of how I think things should be because I'm so smart on my own. And the men that were in my life when I was sober before, see, my mind would tell me that everyone was just judging me and looking down on me and making fun of me and because that's what I would do to people when I was sober. And there was a guy for about 2 months straight that would come to this meeting every Monday and pick up a white chip, which meant like he's starting all over. Okay. And he would do it every Monday for like 6 or 8 weeks, and I was judging him. Mm-hmm. But I then, the person I was judging, that I thought I was better than, like, I couldn't do that. So I thought everyone was just judging me. And well, that's the cornerstone of triggers, you know. When people trigger us, it's because it's something unhealed within us. 100%. Come to find out, I get back, and everyone's just so supportive. And I'm so thankful that I had men in my life, I still have, that were still sober, that still had what I wanted, and that were like, yo, dude, like, you didn't lose, like, you just lost a date, who cares? Right. Like, you're still here, now let's figure out where the cracks are, and let's use the tools this time to like figure it out. And I had men in my life that said, we're going to learn how to get spiritual, we're going to learn how to get vulnerable, we're going to learn how to get honest, we're going to learn how to be we're going to do these. And I had never known how to do those things on my own. Like, I didn't know how to really care about other people. I'm not saying I do it perfectly, but I could never be in a place on my own to be there for others, right, and really care. Yeah. I could never be in a place to be vulnerable with someone else and say, like, that's how you're feeling, like, here's my experience, and to really be in a place where I didn't need other people's validation to make me feel worth something. Yeah. Right? Yeah. And that didn't happen overnight. This has been and it still is, it's been a continual journey of figuring life out. And if it wasn't for the God of my understanding, if it wasn't for men in my life that have taught me that, like, being vulnerable is okay. Mm-hmm. Like, put that ego aside. Like, let's do everything we can to kill that ego. And let's talk about things. And it doesn't mean I'm not egotistical. It doesn't mean my ego doesn't run. I mean, we all do all the time. Yeah, have that come up for us. But I'm more aware. It's sobriety is given me an awareness today that when things are off or when I'm feeling a certain way, it's taught me to pause. Mm-hmm. Right? It's taught me to take a step back in the moment and say, okay, why am I feeling this way? I've had to figure out the why for a lot of things, and I've had to do uncomfortable work. I was sharing this before we started, that I thought like putting drugs and alcohol down would be like the hardest thing I've ever had to do, and that was so relatively easy in comparison to having to talk about how I feel to other men on pretty much a daily basis.
Yeah.
And as I mentioned, this is the hardest thing I've ever had to do in my life, but it's also the most rewarding, because this feeling that I have found, and again, I'm no different than anyone else. The backgrounds, the story, the origin, all that might be different, but it's irrelevant because the feelings are the same. I've had to learn that it's okay to not be okay. I've had to learn that, like, I don't have to have this wall up.
Yeah.
I don't have to.
You don't have to hide.
I don't have to hide. I don't have to protect these feelings. Like, I can let them out and talk about them.
Right.
Because other people have been through it.
Yeah.
And it's been difficult.
Yeah.
But it's been so rewarding, because my life, ups and downs, pressures, difficulties, is still so, it's better than I've ever imagined.
Yeah.
And it's even better than I ever imagined, because I didn't even want it. Like, I couldn't, if someone would have told me before I got sober that this is where my life could be if I did these things, I would have said that's impossible. And I'm thankful that I still have men in my life to kind of help me direct to this life that, like, is better than, again, I've ever, like, my life is so full today.
That's so powerful.
And I found this feeling that I was, like, chasing for so long. I was, like, chasing death for. I found peace. I found being okay with myself. The imperfections, the bad days, the days I struggle, like, finding the sun, even if it's outside my window. Like, those bad days, like, I still have peace with myself. And I know bad feelings aren't going to last.
Yeah.
And I know, with the help of other people, how to navigate through them.
The question I have after everything you just said, though, is how did you get to where you could feel your feelings?
I think it happened over time. I think looking back, it was the help of other people. Saying I'm good wasn't good enough. And I still have people in my life. I have dear friends who will call me and say, how are you? And I'll say, I'm good. And they'll say, okay, what's really going on? No, I'm good. And it sometimes still takes like 3 or 4 times for me to say, well, I got this going on. Because life is good today, right? But I can't get lost in life being good that I ignore any feelings that I might have going on, that my mind can say, well, yeah, you have those feelings, or you have this stress, or you have this thing, but you're good. So, like, you're good and you can ignore those things. And so it's being aware. And I think over time, a lot of it took my sponsor making me talk to newcomers. I think a lot of it took me opening up and allowing people in. And trust is a hard thing for me. Letting people in and trusting that they're not going to use it against me, that they're not going to leave, that they're not going to, whatever the case may, dangle over my head like a carrot, and it's
throw it back at your face in a form of manipulation.
Yeah, and I'm fortunate that I have men in my life today that I can turn to and talk to and trust with the stuff going on in my life. And I'm fortunate that when I say I'm good, they know that's not good enough, right? And they know how to, like, get it out of me, because my mind tells me, Matt, you've been sober a while. You know that feeling. You know how to get through it. You can put it on the shelf for now. You can dissect it later. And sometimes you can. Sometimes my awareness allows me, okay, that's not a big thing. I will get to it. But sometimes life shows up, and sometimes you're faced to, like, have to pick up the phone and talk about how you're feeling. Sometimes you have to pick up the phone and allow yourself to, like, talk to someone else, or allow yourself to feel feelings that are, like, in comparison to my ego, like the feelings I don't want to feel. And the more I've done that, the easier it's gotten. It doesn't mean it's easy.
No.
It's gotten easier. Right. I look at it this way. I have like 32 years of chaos and destruction and crazy that I dealt with. And now I'm working on, like, peace didn't come immediately, but in this 7 years and a little bit of time of sobriety, it's beginning to balance out, where my default isn't, let me burn this bridge down, let me cause havoc, let me cause chaos. It's almost my default slowly becomes, okay, my immediate thought is, let me talk about it. Let me find someone that I trust and talk about it. Let me allow myself, if someone calls me, to talk to me about what's going on, to allow myself to be open to them. Like, My biggest aim today is to be useful. Like my purpose today is to be useful to others. Like my life isn't just about me today, you know? But to get to a point where I'm comfortable talking about my feelings, it's been like a slow turn to get to a point where it just becomes like...
Because it wasn't the norm for guys. And this is the thing, is women deal with a lot of stuff too. And we did talk a little bit about this, but we also talk a lot.
Yeah.
So if I've dealt with stuff, anxiety, depression, hard childhood, but I've always talked about it.
Yeah.
It's when you don't get to talk about it, it stays inside and it festers. And I love that you keep saying that you have a lot of men, because I feel like that's where it has to be. You have to be able to see other men be vulnerable in order for you to see that it's okay to be vulnerable, and just keep passing that down and passing that down.
And that's a perfect way to like the illustration of I had to see other men do it. Other men were doing it before, but I wasn't able to really see it. I couldn't comprehend it. I didn't think that it was something I could do, because I was so ingrained of that's not what quote unquote men do. Like my lens of what a man should be was skewed from the start. Mm-hmm. And that's the only way that I've learned how to do it, is watching other people do it, like really seeing it and seeing that the more you did it, the more they didn't need other people's validation to make them feel good. The more they didn't need to be part of this to make them feel like they began to feel okay with who they were. And even the negative feelings, and even when life shows up unexpectedly, I watched other men be able to get through these things. And I'm fortunate that I was at a place where I was willing to try, continue to do anything to get me to a place where that I know that there's going to be a positive outcome doing it, no matter how uncomfortable, no matter how unorthodox it might be, no matter how against the grain it goes for me sometimes to talk about what's going on. I know that there's going to be a bigger response, a better outcome doing it than I compare it to this. If you take like a 20-ounce bottle of Coke, this is how I compared my 3 years sober before, and this is how I never want to be again. You take like a 20-ounce bottle of Coke and you tighten the lid on real tight, and you shake it up. Mm-hmm. Well, that's how my feelings were for 3 years. You shake it up, and a little bit of mess comes out, and you clean up the mess, and it settles back down, and nobody knows. Mm-hmm. Except it's exhausting to make sure the lid's on real tight every single day. And for me, like one day that lid was loose, and that emotional mess came out. And that's in turn why I thought I needed to take something to clean up this emotional mess, instead of saying, okay, this is all my stuff. Let me ask someone else to help me dissect it and break it apart. Now I'm fortunate that I don't have to keep that lid on real tight. That if I'm feeling something, I can just let it out. I can be okay with it. I can, again, as I said, be okay with not being okay, because life shows up unexpectedly sometimes, and we're faced and almost, it's a choice, but I'm almost forced to deal with feelings or go back to stuffing it. And in my experience, when I stuff feelings, bad things happen. And I don't just hurt myself. I hurt other people. I bring other people down with me.
And I feel like that's so true, though, not to interrupt you, but not just for someone who deals with substance abuse, but men in general, when you stuff it down and then it turns into a huge, I don't want to say mess, but you turn around and breathe fire on the people you love. You don't have to have substance abuse to be the issue. That's how marriages become dissolved. That's how parents don't have not parents, I want to say mothers too, but fathers then don't have relationships with their children. It's that stuffing it, and then the huge explosion that comes out.
I imploded is what happened, and now I'm glad that I can. Here's the crazy part. I can choose to stuff. I can choose to shake up that bottle with the lid on real tight. I can choose that. It's a choice for me. But I know that when I do that, if I continue to do that, it's going to end up being a huge mess. Yeah. That it's going to affect other people. Right. Or I can just swallow my pride, be vulnerable, know that I'm not alone, and talk about those things that come up, whether it's something I've been dealing with or something out of the blue, and know that it's going to pass. Because in the past, life would show up and I would think that's doomsday. It's forever. End, and this is forever. It.
It's done.
I think it's really interesting. My mind does a really good job now that I have found this peaceful feeling, this joy of living. My mind can't convince me that drugs and alcohol are going to solve life's problems. that obsession has been removed. I'm not cured.
Right.
I'm one bad decision away from losing everything. But my mind it works overtime to take me from this like peaceful place I'm in, and tries to put me out in like left field by myself, trying to figure out life on my own, trying to like figure out a shortcut of not having it. Like it works really hard to do that. But the only way that and there's been plenty of times where I've been out like in the wilderness by myself, and the only way that I've been able to come back to this peaceful feeling is to talk about it and talk about how I got there and talk about the way I'm feeling, because my default is still sometimes to stuff and to I'm good and I'm not going to let people in because this is a big thing, or this is a big emotion, or this is
or it's not that important,
or it's
yeah.
See, it's either so big or so small.
Yeah.
And that's something I've also struggled with, that I'm either like way better than people or way worse. What I've realized the very hard way is I'm no different than anyone else.
Yeah.
Like I am on even playing field. That alcoholism and drug addiction, mental health, there's no discrimination. And it's I've had to learn to be kind to other people, and in the same breath like learn to be kind to myself, which the latter of the two is very difficult, because I can be nice to every person I come across, but it really, being nice to myself really depends on like my inner dialogue.
Yeah.
And being aware of when it's negative self-talk, because before that just ran the show. Now when it happens, because it does, because I'm human, I can like take a step back and say like, where is this coming from, and like why is it coming from there, and how can I correct it? And for me it's prayer and it's being vulnerable. Those are the two things that I never knew how to do before, and those are spirituality and vulnerability are the two biggest things that have made such a difference, and not just in my sobriety, but in my life, you know, especially when life shows up, and especially when like things happen that you're not, you know, emotionally or mentally prepared for. Is that okay, cool, I can pause for a second and know that I could either go one of two ways. I can either stuff this and be fine and be okay and I'm good and let it fester and let it grow, or I can just nip it and like talk about it immediately. And I'm fortunate enough that I have had men and still have men in my life that showed me that taught me how to pause.
Yeah, that pause is where the answers come.
Yeah.
And that's when God gets in there.
Yeah. And it's tough, because that pause isn't natural for me.
No.
That
not for most people.
No, I want to react.
Yeah.
I want to react off of feelings. And most of the time I want to react negatively because I'm fearful, or I'm frightened, or it's the unknown, or I'm feeling attacked, right? Because that's my ego saying they're going to hurt you.
Your brain goes into survival mode.
Yeah, and majority of the time it's never that way.
Yeah.
But my mind immediately wants me to come out aggressive, or I'm fine and like pull away completely.
Yeah.
Now I have the ability to face these things, not on my own, because I still can't, but I can face these things with other people in my life that have navigated. I always compare it to like not to age myself, but the show American Gladiators. When I was young, at the end of it, there was this.
Hey, I watched it too.
So there was this maze.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's going to work, but I'm a big metaphor and analogy guy, because that's just the way I keep things simple. And there was a person at the top, or at the end of the maze, like shooting out like balls at the person. And for me, I look at it like that's life, like shooting out stuff.
It does.
And I have to somehow navigate through this maze of life, where if I'm not careful, I turn left and I run into a wall, or I turn right and I run into laser or taser, razor, whoever. But fortunately enough, I've had men in my life through this maze, and they're vulnerable enough and open enough with me to help me navigate through this thing called life. And sometimes early on, it's like, yo, turn left. And I'm like, but I think right's the way, and they'll let me. Or God will be like, you go this way. And I'm like, but I think the other way is the right way. And I'll learn the hard way that like my way and my way of thinking runs me into walls and runs me into lasers and tasers and razors. And if I'm allow myself to be open and vulnerable, that I don't have all the answers or any of them on my own, that it makes life a little bit easier to like navigate through and to like be able to enjoy it even when life shows up.
I was going to say something too, because you're talking about your brain and the reaction. And I want to just say how very normal that is, especially so many kids. And I have the statistic somewhere, and the body keeps score. How many kids grew up and difficult home environments. Your parents can love you to the end of the world and still mess up and do things, yell, scream, or other things happen. But what happens is your brain goes into fight or flight, and then at some point it doesn't come out of fight or flight. And that reaction that you had when your brain's in survival mode is because it's in fight or flight. And it's in that pause that your brain can kind of take a rest.
Yeah.
And then that, instead of making these quick decisions from that front part of your brain, it's now moving back to where it's supposed to be. But I'm curious what you think of this, because I say it a lot.
Sure.
I truly believe that there are no wrong paths, that every path you go down was meant to teach you a lesson. And even if it was a really hard, dark alley, it was there because you needed to get something out of that experience.
I think that's much easier to believe when one, I believe that. But okay. I'm smirking because I think that's a lot easier to believe once you're out of it.
Yes.
Right? But 100%. But it's really tough. Looking back, it was really tough to realize that I went through those things. Like if someone would have told me back then that you're going to go through these things and this is what your life's going to look like and it's 100% boom. That would have been easier at that point for me to be like, okay, I'm just going to go through this because I know the outcome is going to be over here. But it's having, that it's like hindsight. I said this earlier to someone, like just because we can't see the outcome doesn't mean we shouldn't be obedient through the process. And for me, that's like where faith comes in. Yeah. That I'm going through this thing, or I'm going through this moment, or I have a week left before I check into treatment. And I didn't know where the hope came from, but I had enough hope where I stopped praying to die.
Yeah.
And when life shows up, I do my best to not say if something's good or if something's bad, even if something's really bad or I feel like it's something really bad, because I don't know if that thing can end up producing like something good from it, even if I'm seeing it only as this bad thing.
That is very true.
But it's very difficult.
Yeah, it is. And I'm 100%. Oh my gosh. I think even when I'm in hard times, so you said something earlier too, you still battle with these things. Yeah, I've been on my healing journey for over a decade now. Yeah. And I've wondered, last year was a really hard year mentally for me. And I must have said 1,000 times, how am I still dealing with this?
Yeah.
We heal in layers. It doesn't go away. You learn how to, I don't even want to say, I do believe you can heal and heal these parts of you, but it doesn't mean that anxiety is not going to rear its ugly head. Depression's not going to rear its ugly head. And then you get to look at it and say, how am I going to deal with you this time?
I couldn't agree. I couldn't agree more. This guy I work with, who I just greatly respect, he said it's those things that are in our bones.
Yeah.
And I had never. He maybe said this 6 or 7 months ago, and he just said it like the wind blew, like nothing really. Like he had said it before, but to me, like it's stuck. It's stuck like glue. And what I've realized is there are things, whether it be mental health, whether it be feelings, whether it be triggers, whether it be anything at all. That's the stuff that I'm built on. That's the stuff that's in my bones. The advantage that I have found in sobriety on my journey of healing is those things can come up. Those things that are still in my bones that I'm built on, but I don't have to react on them now.
Right.
Like, and that's to me where that pause comes in, because it can make me feel uncomfortable. It can make me want to react. But nothing good has ever come from me reacting to something.
Yeah.
Even if I have to pause, and my response ends up being, instead of reacting, my response ends up being doing nothing at all. Or is it picking up the phone, or is it praying, or is it doing something to get out of whatever it may be. Like, my reaction has never caused anything good, but my reaction is all I've ever known. Like, that's my default, is to react. Boom, something happens, I'm gonna react, instead of boom, something happens, let me take a breath, let me pause for a second and kind of look at this for what it's worth. I don't have to choose to do that today.
Yeah. Well, that awareness is huge, though. And nobody's reaction ever serves.
No.
That's the thing. Because I love how you're so humble. You're saying but literally, like, no. And nobody, my reaction has never served.
Yeah, but I always thought because it's my reaction, or because it's my honesty, or it's because of how I feel, that I'm going to react to this thing and tell you how I'm feeling.
Right.
Those, looking back, and I still fall short and I still struggle with it, but I'm aware of it today at least, is most times when I react to those things, it's out of fear. It's out of feeling attacked. It's out of feeling uncertain. It's out of the unknown. It's out of feeling like I'm going to get hurt. And again, it's the way my mind tells me that's what's going to happen. This happened, so you're going to get hurt because of this. So here's the way you react. Boom, I react. And now I can take a step back and say, okay, that's not real. That's not the reality of this.
Yeah.
That's just the way perception is not always reality.
No.
And my perception of things on my own has made my reality always worse.
I just love that you said that, though, because our perception is not reality.
No.
And coming out of that, stepping out of our own space, out of our own little mind, seeing that bird's eye view, that bigger picture, that truly is one of the biggest keys.
Well, I think I completely agree. I think this too. I think of like a racehorse that has really tunnel vision, that only looks ahead and can't see anything else around him. And that's kind of how my life's been. It's been this tunnel vision of like what I want and what I need and what I'm going to do to get what I want. And if I hurt other people, like, it doesn't matter. It's I. And having that mentality never got me anywhere of like full satisfaction, of feeling okay with me. It may have given me like instant gratification, but then I find myself like going back to an empty well, right? Sobriety and the help of other men have helped me like pull back the way I see things. And it says in the big book of AA that we have a lack of perspective. And my whole life I've had a lack of perspective. And I'm grateful today that I can choose to have a bigger perspective on things. I can choose not to. I can choose to look at things my way and my way only. But that awareness we talked about, I know when that's happening. And I know when I'm kind of shifting my perspective to that. And I can pause and realize that when I do that, like, that outcome is never good for myself or anyone around me.
Yeah. That's so incredible that you shared all of that. And you know what? I feel like I could sit here and talk to you forever. I love that we've gone as long as we have, though, because I think everything you've said has really been needed. It's needed. I want to ask you one more thing.
Sure.
What is something that you might say to someone who is really in that dark well right now and they don't know how to climb out?
It like gets me emotional thinking about it because I can picture myself in that deep well.
Yeah.
And I'm thankful I can still remember it, and not for any reason to live in shame or guilt, but to remember where I came from, because if I forget where I came from, like, I'm never going to make it where I'm going, no matter where that I'm going is. I don't know what that looks like. But I just know I'm a lot better than where I was in that well. Like, that's my baseline. And even if that baseline is real low, like, as long as I don't get there again.
Yeah.
I would tell people if people are struggling in active addiction, or people are struggling with alcoholism, or people are struggling with anything when we're up against death, that you don't have to flip that coin anymore. To me, I kind of look at it as like we have this coin. And all these choices we make, we're flipping it, especially when it comes to substance use disorder and alcoholism. We flip this coin and it lands on life, and our minds tell us, you're good. See, you're not like those people, and you're different. And then we flip it again and it lands on life, and we flip it again and it lands on life, and we flip it again and it lands on life. And we think we're in the clear. And what I've realized, and it's unfortunate, the longer I've stayed sober, there's people that I have gotten close to and cared about that have unfortunately passed away because they flipped that coin one more time and it lands on death. And death doesn't need permission. It doesn't need approval. We can't beat death. The only thing I've learned to do is stop fighting death, stop fighting against it. So if there's like two things that I could like tell anyone who might be deep in that well like I was in, have some hope. And if you don't know where hope begins, like, that's okay, I didn't either. But start talking about it, because there's like a high mathematical probability that someone else has felt that way. And the other thing is, like, stop flipping the coin. Like, no matter how hard my life has been or difficult it's been, or difficulties or pressures, or life shows up out of the blue, or you have to deal with, or I've had to deal with feelings, like, I just know that at the end of the day, I don't have to flip that coin. And I know that, like, this pain that I'm feeling in whatever moment, like, it's not going to last forever. And I can find peace in that. I can find peace in knowing, like, bad days will end. And tomorrow I have a better chance, as long as I don't flip that coin.
That's so incredible.
Thanks.
Choose life.
Yeah. We get to. There's a lot of people I know, unfortunately, don't get to choose life. And I used to use the word have. I have to do this. Oh, I have to do this.
Right.
Oh, I have to do this. Oh, woe is me, right? I get to do these things today. Like, I got to wake up today, and it sounds corny and it sounds cliche, and it's like, oh, I get to wake up today. I got to wake up today to a life that's better than I ever imagined, to a life that I didn't even want. And I'm no different, again, than the next person at all. I just asked for help. I chose wisely to ask the people for help. And when I didn't know how to choose wisely, I asked people how to choose wisely.
Yeah.
And I still ask for that same help today. And I was only able to get out of that bottom of the well with the help of other people. My mom said this. I don't know. I was a couple months sober, and I was behind on everything. And I was overwhelmed because all I could look and see was the mess that I made. The mess.
Yeah.
That's all I could see. And my mother, who I should have never put in the positions she was in, is pretty knowledgeable. And she said, Matt, did you put yourself in this position overnight? And I said, well, no, Mom, of course not. She said, then why do you expect that you can get out of it overnight?
How beautiful.
Yeah, way beyond my, like, thought process, huh? And
I almost just have to say it again because, wow, so many people feel like they can't get out of what they're in.
Right.
But you didn't get there overnight. You're not going to get out of there
Yeah.
overnight, and it's going to take work.
Yeah, and that's it's a choice, and I had to choose to lean on people early on to help me financially, to help me get out of this, to help me get out of that. I had to lean on people early on to help me get through that maze of life, and fast forward 7 years later, I still have to lean on people. Like, I have to. I cannot figure out life well on my own. I can't, and I know that. And at the end of the day, if I choose not to flip that coin, no matter how tough the day might be, I know it's not going to last, and tomorrow can be better as long as I don't pick up that coin and flip it, because it could land on death, like I said, without my permission, without my approval. And then all these people that care about me are just left with a bunch of feelings they're probably not going to know how to get through.
Damn. That was so good, though.
Thanks.
Matt, I'm so grateful that you came and sat here, was willing to share your story with me.
Yeah.
It's exactly what I could ever want for Courageous Conversations, because I know that through other stories, people can see themselves and they can see what's possible. And just the idea that maybe one person might listen to this and it changed their life, even if it doesn't, you made such an impact on my life already just sitting here.
Well, thank you.
So
I think if there was and I appreciate the kind words. I think if there was like a third thing I could tell people in that like deep hole, like, it's okay to ask for help.
yeah,
Because I never thought it was okay. I never thought it was okay to ask for help. I never thought it was okay to talk about how I feel. And because of that, I never thought that there could be another option besides like flipping that life or death coin, you know?
Mm-hmm.
You know, again, I've been fortunate enough to be in a position to allow myself, through the help of other people, to be useful to others, or try to be. Because if I can, I don't know, I always look at it, if I can like save, anytime I've spoken or any group I've run or any place I've been, if I can help one person from saving them from living the hell that I didn't, not just that I put myself through, but more importantly that I put my loved ones through, and put the people that I care the most about through, then like my hell became worth it. and if you're still here and you're still breathing, no matter like where you might be in this deep well, like you have a chance. You have a chance that a lot of people I know firsthand wish they had. My best friend and other dear friends of mine that have passed away, he would switch places with me in a heartbeat on my quote unquote worst day. And I need to remember that like I get to do these things today. I get to have a life today, and I need to continue to remember that.
Because you asked for help.
Yeah, and I still do. Because I'm not good at life on my own.
I don't know that any of us really are.
Yeah.
And I think
that's the beautiful thing.
Yeah. We need each other, and we need to be able to lift each other up.
Yeah. And I think that's real quickly, for me, that statement couldn't be more true. But that statement, especially early on in my entire life, went against every way I was built internally. That like, I need other people to deal with, to help me through life. I need other people to help me get through these feelings. I need other people to help me. Like that wasn't natural to me. That wasn't normal to me. And now over time, I had this guy tell me this. I don't know. I had a guest at a facility tell me this, and I told him I would always quote him because I didn't come up with it on my own. He said, we need to give ourselves the gift of time. And I'm thankful that I had other men in my life show me to do that, show me how to do that, still show me how to do that, so I don't get caught in this of life, that I can just relax and like let time be what it is and know that everything's going to work out as it's supposed to.
In that pause.
Yeah.
That's that pause.
And it's all in the pause.
Yeah. So beautiful. Thank you. Like a million times over. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
All right, you guys, if you or someone you know needs help, please check the show notes for resources. And as always, you are valued. You are loved. It's going to be okay. Bye now.